All right, we're going to get started here, and hopefully everybody can hear me. A thumbs up. Eric, can you hear me okay? All right. Perfect. Well, welcome. I'm Jim Bode, managing partner and co-owner of Beck Bode, and today we are going to be talking about the college admissions process and what families are feeling as they start to think about and prepare for their child to enter college. It has absolutely changed over the years, and I'm experiencing it as a parent of a sophomore in college, and some of the pressure that these kids are feeling nowadays, and some of the stats that are coming out there with how hard it is to get into college. Not just the cost, but choosing the right colleges is definitely overwhelming for any family as they enter that stage of a kid making this very big, costly decision. And today we have Eric Simonelli from a company called College Solutions to kind of reflect on his 20 years of experience on working with high school students as well as different university departments. Eric has worked for the University of Rhode Island. He has worked for LaSalle Academy as a Collins counselor and numerous private companies where he is today with College Solutions. He helps families and future college students prepare for what they are going to be dealing with all aspects of selecting the appropriate university for them. Historically, I would say when I was in school, which now was 20 plus years ago, we relied on our guidance counselor to help advise us on making those decisions. The college selection process has gotten extremely competitive, extremely confusing, and Eric's here to hopefully answer a few questions and put our minds at ease on some of the things we can do and think about as we prepare for this process. We do have an open chat box. If you have specific questions that you want to have, you can type it in to the Q&A at the bottom. At the end, we will send around contact information for everybody. If you have specific questions to what you're experiencing with your child or with your financial plan, you can reach out to us and we can hopefully get some answers for you. So let's jump into this, Eric. Welcome. I appreciate you taking the time to do this for us and for our clients and friends. But can you kind of give us an overview of what College Solutions is, why someone might use it, and kind of how you get involved and when you get involved in this process?
Thanks a lot, Jim. I really appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning. Absolutely. As Jim mentioned, I've been on both sides of the desk. I've seen it from a college admissions perspective, where students are applying to college and have understood how to review a file, how to give out scholarships, merit scholarships, how to look at targeted majors. I've also seen it from a college counseling perspective, advising students through the process. And as Jim mentioned, it's changed dramatically over the last year, and certainly the pandemic made it even more complicated. So College Solutions has got a 25-year track record. We focus on 3 pillars: academic, social, and financial. We offer support to families to ensure that a student has the strongest application possible with a strategy involved. So we realize that college admissions is not what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So the strategy to create an application narrative and to understand the scholarship process for a 4-year competitive school is certainly time consuming, and it doesn't start just in the junior year. We try to aim for students to discover who they are, to use who they are, what their background is, to apply to the best fit college. Our team of counselors have decades of experience combined. All of our staff is over 100 years of experience, so we collaborate regularly as we are a full service college counseling firm. So we do have a representative out in the West Coast area, in LA, in the Midwest in Chicago, down in Orlando, in the DC area, and I'm here in New England. And as Jim mentioned, the average guidance counselor ratio in the state of Massachusetts is 356 to 1, or we could say approximately that number. That number can change a little bit from year to year. So how could a counselor really assist you through this complicated process, knowing all that goes into it, with all the other responsibilities that they have on a daily basis within the actual school day? So What we do one-on-one, customize, is we counsel, guide, and support students and families through this detailed process. First, we help you understand the college landscape. Personally, I visit 25 colleges a year, so I get to know a lot of the ins and outs of each school. That's not in the marketing pitch when you go on a sales, I call it a sales pitch on a tour. What you're getting, how they're marketing their school. We look at what majors your son or daughter may be interested in, knowing that 80% of undergrads change their major once before they graduate, and how these majors could be an actual fit into a career. What you don't want to do nowadays is go into a major that you don't want to use at the end of 4 years, because then you're talking about wasting time, effort, and money. Second, we leverage our experience based on hundreds of colleges that we've seen, as mentioned. We help you really understand the ins and outs of the differences between the schools. Almost 1 in every 2 students transfer over the course of their 4 years because they spend 2 hours on a college campus doing a tour, and they think it's the place for them. And then they go to the school and they realize they're not happy, or they chose to go to a school for a particular major and that they now want to switch into something else that's not offered on the current campus that they're at. So finding the right fit, as Jim mentioned, is really important, so that we can match up your aptitude, your interest, and potentially, your earning part of your career, where that could take you at the end of 4 years. And then finally, third, we work hand in hand to create that narrative. What makes you different? If you had 100 students that look the same on paper, and the acceptance rate is only 15 to 20%, how are you going to separate yourself in a pool where you're going to be one of the 20 students that is admitted out of those 100 students that looks the same on paper? So that includes a curriculum plan, a summer plan, an internship or job shadow plan, building a resume, understanding standardized testing. More and more schools now are coming out and saying that we're going to be requiring testing for next year after this pandemic has changed and made it test optional. How can you become more of a leader in your community and be more of a community service involvement over the course of your high school career? Develop financial aid strategies. What's the best return on investment? And then obviously the detailed application process with essays. Most colleges require their own essay in addition to the 650 word, personal essay that's required of every school. So our role really relieves a lot of pressure, and it offers the third party to the students and parents, so that you don't feel the pressures of managing all these details. So we really spend the time and effort getting to know each student and family, and then make sure that every T is crossed and every I is dotted.
Awesome. So what you don't do is you don't just sit there and people aren't working with you or your company to fill out paperwork. You're also not there to say, based on your child's grades and what they want out of life, putting them in a box like everybody else and saying these are the 3 or 4 schools you should apply to. It's obviously a much more personalized approach from beginning to end of working with these kids. And what I'll say is I think before I said I have a sophomore in college, I have a sophomore in high school. And one of the most stressful times that we have now is figuring out his curriculum, trying to figure out which classes he should take. And every time we select one of those classes, our family, my wife and I are constantly thinking about what impact does him having selected this course have on his GPA, and more importantly, what does that look like for him as he applies for college? So we're thinking about that personally now. So Eric, I'd love to have you spend a few minutes talking about curriculum, the strength of curriculum, the GPA versus core classes, how that is figured out for colleges, to kind of give the families on the call an idea of how colleges are looking at all of this.
Certainly. All right. Well, first of all, every high school has their own school profile. If you don't know that, you can get that from your guidance office, and that will give college admissions offices an idea of how competitive your high school actually is. So if you go to a high school that sends 95% of their students to 4-year colleges, colleges will recognize that as being a very selective and competitive high school. If your high school only sends 60%, they understand that the school might be somewhat competitive. But the first school that I mentioned, students would be regarded on a much higher playing field because there's more better students. So one of the issues that happens with course selection is for the first year, your path is pretty much set by 5 academic subject areas: English, math, lab science, social studies, and languages. Those are the 5 main courses that are required of most high schools over the course of the time that you're in school. Now, in saying that, the first year or so is pretty much regimented to specific courses that all students are going to take. And then in the second year, and in particular in the last 2 years, that's when options become more available and decisions have to be made. So how do you correlate certain courses that are required for certain majors? So if you wanted to go into business or engineering or pharmacy or nursing, there are going to be very specific courses that you need to have on your transcript. So how is that done? Typically, a student will be recommended by their department chair of a subject area. The English department will recommend you for a certain class, or the math department will do the same. You then, your child would then come home and say, yep, this looks good, and the guidance counselor will sign off on that. Typically, not in all cases, that is the majority of time that is spent through that process. One of the mistakes that students make is that if they come to us too late and we don't have the flexibility of setting a really strong junior and senior year that line up to what college admissions offices are looking for, not necessarily what high school graduation requirements are, you can't go back. So a lot of students that go through the course selection at the winter/spring of their sophomore year for their junior year really get to make sure that they are taking the best possible courses, and they understand the differences between making those tough decisions, doubling up on a science or only taking 2 or 3 years of language compared to 4, or how important pre-calculus or calculus is in the overall picture for particular majors. What if you want to get ahead, is there summer options because your student is behind or is only on grade level and you need to jump up? Those are all things that we try to work with students and families to really understand. So we help students understand how to create that curriculum in getting into their top colleges. 99% of the time when we work with families, we help them find the right fit. They're successful. They go to the school and they graduate from that school in 4 years. If you choose the wrong college and you have to transfer, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to probably take more than 4 years to go to college, which is going to cost you a lot more money because you're going to be paying for at least another semester, a year of school. And those credits don't always transfer. So getting your course selection right in high school correlates to getting into the right colleges and finding that right fit. So we try to find a balance of those courses and help you understand the rigor of those courses. So traditionally, AP courses are or IB courses are the most challenging courses you can take in a subject area. Honors classes would be the second tier, and then college prep would be the third tier. College prep is the kind of the baseline of what you need, the minimum of what you need for your college application process. So if you're only taking prep classes, whatever grade you receive is really what you get. So if you get a B in an English class, your GPA would be a 3.0 out of 4 if your school works on a 4.0 scale. But if you took an honors English class and you got the B, if your school weights your GPA, they give you more points for taking an honors class over a college prep class. You would technically have a 3.3 GPA or a little bit higher. You get a little bit more points for taking a tougher class. Now, if you took an AP English class and you got a B, that would even jump up even higher, maybe 3.4 or 3.5. So schools also will weight your GPA based on the levels of courses, and colleges will look at that. How many honors and AP classes have you taken over the course of your 3 and 4 years in high school as you go through the process? So taking the right high school course matter. They matter in the application process because those colleges are going to analyze the rigor of the student's academic narrative over the 4 years. You're obviously only going to see 3 full years of grades: freshman, sophomore, and junior year. Senior year, they'll see the courses listed, but when you apply to college in the fall of your senior year, you most likely won't have grades yet. You'll only potentially have close to first quarter grades. And in that case, you could send your first quarter grades, but it's 3 years plus a quarter unless you apply for some later deadlines, or you don't apply, or you apply early and you get deferred into later deadlines. So the greater the student's course rigor, the overall higher GPA that could be weighted. Now, how do you find that balance? So we really work with students where parents are pushing students to take 4 or 5 AP classes in a year, which can be a lot on a student that's involved in their school, involved in sports, got a busy life. How does that balance with their mental health? And really, what does one more AP course matter compared to an honors class? So finding that balance is also essential, because we understand that there are other things that come into play other than just one course. But we want students and families to understand that when colleges do analyze these 5 core subjects, it's going to be how it's reviewed in the overall bigger picture, from a high school perspective of how many courses that you've taken in those subject areas. So if your teacher doesn't recommend you for a certain class, they don't recommend you for an AP history class, and you really want to get in, you're on that borderline, do you just allow the process to play out and just take an honors course? How do you learn how to advocate for yourself to potentially get into that course and push to get into that course if the department isn't allowing you to do that? So those are all things, Jim, that we try to focus in on, and really have families understand both avenues, the high school perspective and then how it's viewed from a college side.
Awesome. Can you just quickly also just touch on, and I don't think, Eric, we've talked about this even, can you touch on testing, your GPA compared to your testing score with the SATs, and how that is viewed as well? And when is the right time to start taking those tests?
Well, most students take their PSATs in 9th or 10th grade. Some schools start as early as 9th grade. Other schools start as early as 10th grade. If your child has taken the PSATs in 10, that would be the time to start the process there, because you have some data. First, College Board did create a free platform for all students to use about 10 years ago. They said anybody that couldn't afford a tutor, a test prep tutor, wasn't going to do as well on the standardized testing. And so they created this free platform. It's not like buying a book at Barnes and Nobles. It really takes your results of your practice PSAT tests, your practice tests, and it logs it into this platform. And this platform then creates a free test prep platform to work with to really study. So to answer your question, sophomore into the early parts of your junior year, because at the October of your junior year is the last practice test that you'll take. So most students start either December or March of their junior year. They take it 2 or 3 times. And then you have to make the decision of how far you want to take it. Now, if your list of schools have a variety of schools that require testing and that are test optional, those are all conversational pieces for us to have as far as how far we want to push it. But I will say more and more schools now are coming back and requiring testing off of the pandemic. And then the other thing to think about is, if you start earlier in the sophomore year or the early part of the junior year, you can decide if you want to go with the SAT or if you want to go with the ACT. The ACT is not usually taken a lot around in New England, but it is taken much more so in other parts of the country, and it's looked at on the same playing field as the SAT.
Awesome. And then just to wrap up curriculum before we kind of move on to funding and spending. One of the questions that just came in was looking at the freshman, sophomore, junior year, and what classes again are, or what grades are most important to be focused on. Does freshman year matter? Does sophomore year matter? It sounds like you said senior year, you've already selected in most cases which school you're going to be going to, and you've potentially have already been accepted. So what years are really the crucial years for your GPA and course selection?
Well, most of the students don't get into their AP classes until their sophomore year or junior year. So most students are just taking, college prep or honors courses in their freshman year. What people don't understand is your freshman year is really set by 8th grade. So if you're not in Algebra 1 in 8th grade, for example, you can't get ahead in math unless you make up a class over the summer. So college admissions officers look for trends. They look to see if a student is a math and science brain or if they're reading, writing brain. Typically, if a student is perfect in both, then they're unique. So that's the first thing. If a student takes specific classes as a freshman and they do very well, they have a higher probability of getting into some better classes in their sophomore and junior year. So when you look at trends, if you're continuing to improve and they're climbing up the mountain, and you're taking better classes and your grades are high, that's the ideal situation. What colleges don't want to see is a heart monitor of grades all over the place. They can't tell why a student got a B in this class and an A+ in this class in the same subject area in 2 different years. Senior year courses matter, and senior year first quarter and first semester matter. But after the first semester, the process is pretty much over at that point. So colleges only look at your final grades in the first 3 years. So that's 4 quarters, a midterm and a final for freshman, sophomore, junior year. And then they look at the courses and then those quarter or semester grades in the senior year.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's talk about money. I mean, that's what we deal a lot with. We talk a lot about planning for college and the cost of college. Can you take the last few minutes here and talk about financial aid, talk about merit money, even touch on scholarship money if you can, just to kind of set the expectation of what a lot of our clients are dealing with right now.
Absolutely. This is the number one topic in the college process. And I always say the college admissions process nowadays is 50% getting into a school and 50% how you're going to pay for it, especially if you have multiple children. So merit money is based on a student's academic achievements in high school. Colleges are rewarding you or your child for academic performance overall over the course of time based on what we just discussed in the last question. Financial aid is based on your family's adjusted gross income, AGI, along with your assets. So each college counts a family's net worth differently. It's not a black and white process. So merit scholarships is one way to close the gap. It's an easy way to get free money, even if you don't qualify for federal aid. How do you know what colleges you're going to get those merit scholarships from? And overall, how do you know if what college is going to give you that money? How do you line that up with demonstrating your interest in those schools? Merit aid is again not considered a form of your financial need. So it's an opportunity for a tuition discount. It's typically guaranteed for all 4 years as long as a student maintains a minimum GPA while in college. And that's usually around a 2.8 or a 3.0, so it's very obtainable. Elite colleges, Ivy League schools, very selective schools like Stanford, MIT, Caltech, et cetera, they don't give any merit awards. So they use what's called the EFC, the expected family contribution. That's what the federal government says that your family should afford. Okay, that doesn't mean what you can afford, what you should afford. That calculator basically determines what colleges are going to bring the sticker price down to. So for example, if a college were $56,000 for tuition and fees and another $18,000 for room and board, and you are under a certain income threshold, you may pay significantly less to go to that school, even if they don't offer merit. So what that means is, let's say Oberlin College, a very selective college in Ohio, they charge you that $56,000, and they offer about 40% of students merit aid, and the average student gets about 16 or 17,000. That might be a way for you to get that merit money. But at a school like Brown, where they don't give merit, and you are under, let's say, $300,000, you may only pay 10 to 20% of your AGI to go to that school because they are meeting what that EFC calculator says. So there's a lot to determine. There's a lot to appeal. It's not a simple process. So there are 2 forms. One, which is called the FAFSA form, the federal financial aid form that all colleges require. Even if you don't think you're going to qualify for federal aid, you should fill out this form because you can't get a financial aid package, merit, or federal money without completing that form. And also a CSS profile. Now, the CSS profile is more of a detailed form, and it's not required by every college. So if a college does require a CSS profile, that means that they're going to dive into your assets, second homes, boats, extra cars. They're going to use all that against you and say, that's part of your overall income or your net worth, and you should use that towards paying for college. So there's a lot to think about, a lot to consider. And then the last part is loans. Most parents don't understand that after getting a federal loan, parents have to co-sign on those loans. So that means that you can take out about $30,000, students can on their own, and the rest is technically, even though it's under a student's name, tied to parents. So that means that if a student went to a college that was $80,000 and they got no merit and they got no federal aid and it was full price and the family only contributed $60,000 a year, only, as crazy as that sounds, that means that there would be a $20,000 gap. So if a student and a family were to take out $20,000 a year over 4 years, that'd be $80,000 of debt for an undergraduate degree. So for every $40,000 borrowed, we tell students it's about $200 a month for 20 years. Is that worth it? Or if you got a big merit package to a school like Oberlin or to another school, depending on what your income is, to bring it way down, school like Brown or Tufts or something of that nature, where you were fortunate enough to get in and they were in, and you got the tuition way down to 20 or 30,000, the return on investment in something like that would be significant. So the overall process of money is super complicated. It's not black and white, and there's a lot to think about as you kind of unpeel the process. The last thing I'll leave you with here is the federal forms are now based off of prior years. So if your son or daughter graduates in 2023, they use 2021 taxes. So if your child is a sophomore right now, Jim, you have to start thinking about this year's taxes that's going to be used in the college process and how you want to go through that process.
So with you saying that, because it's obviously what I'm dealing with personally,
Yep.
Is there a place, what I get asked all the time, is there a place to add money? Is there certain, maybe my house or a second home, what are they looking at on that second form? What when you say they're using my tax returns from 2021 based on my son being a sophomore, where could I put money if I had extra money to put away? So
there's several ways to approach this process, and there's not just one direct answer. I mean, I always tell people, you know, Roth is always the best way to go, but I think ultimately, anywhere that you are showing assets, whether it's a savings account or a 529 plan or stock, you know, that is going to be used against you. You're going to be expected to use that to pay for college, or else you're going to get no federal money. And I would say that if your income threshold is really low, you should expect to get a lot of federal aid. If your income is extremely high, you're going to qualify for nothing, and you have to decide that question I said before, which is 50% is getting in and 50% is paying for it. If you're willing to pay for it, you can do it. What happens to everybody else in the middle? Everybody else in the middle is in the same type of situation. They're not getting a lot of federal help. They have to figure out if they're willing to spend that kind of money, and if they have all these other assets, and they know that they're not going to get any federal money. The best way to go about the process is to put money away in Roths, because you can use it in multiple ways, and it's tax-free. But also, you should try to get the best merit package if you're trying to get the cost of college down. That means return on investment. So, you know, if most people assume, all right, if UMass is 32,000 all in, you know, I can't get another college to be 32,000. You absolutely can take a private school if your son or daughter is in the top of the applicant pool and really understand the ins and outs of the process and get that cost to pretty close or less than that in merit money, because colleges have to entice you to enroll. That means you're going to get that discount that we just talked about. So, you know, overall, there's certainly a variety of ways to approach it. But I think that, you know, a 529 and a savings are buying another asset is just going to be used against you overall. It's not necessarily, it's not going to help you. So to move money around, you have to be, you gotta understand how you want to approach that. And if you know that you're not going to get any federal money, regardless of where you were to shift things, then at that point, you're just focused on merit and how to get the most amount of merit. Now, there are a lot of other private scholarships around. Private scholarships meaning from foundations or companies or your school department or in your community that are giving out a lot of free money that you may not be aware of as well. So you could get another $5,000 or $10,000 a year by just applying for these scholarships that are out there from these specific organizations that are they're pushing for you know, strong students to get that free money. And that's also another opportunity that we could show you some of the sites and the resources that we have that the students use to take advantage of getting an extra $3,000 or $5,000 that they didn't even think they could get.
Yeah, awesome. Eric, I appreciate it. It's already past 10:30 and we didn't even get to half of our questions. But I appreciate everybody coming. As hopefully you've all realized, is going through figuring out which university, college is the right one for your child as well as your family. There is a lot of decisions that go into making that. Obviously working with a planner like we do at Beck Bode, but also complementing that with someone like Eric that's going to help guide your family on choosing the right college for a number of reasons that your child would help them become successful for this next phase of their life, is really, really important to complement what we're doing here. So I appreciate you taking the time. What this shows me is we're going to have to do another one of these to get to the rest of our questions, because there's a lot that we want to provide to our clientele. So I appreciate you coming on. We will follow this up for everybody who has joined us with an email, so you have our contact information. You know where to reach out to ask specific questions about what you might be looking for your family. So thank you, Eric. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and make it a great day.
Thank you.